Um, I am David Tucker, and my colleague, also in the chat there, Franklin Mumma. The two of us work with school divisions all over Virginia. We are both with Edmentum. I think Carol Solly here is as well. She is one of our customer success managers. So works with folks, from the division level all the way down to the classroom for professional development and support for our programs. Welcome to everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here this morning. Amy, how are we looking on the waiting room? Does that slow down a little bit?
It has. We've got Jasmine joining us, and I'll continue to admit them, but if you're ready, we can get started. I just want to welcome everyone. I am Amy Griffin. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of VASS. VASS is the Superintendent's Association here in Virginia, and we have been doing a math series all year. And Edmentum has the pleasure, the honor of concluding our math series. So he's got to just really hit it out of the park. This has to be like a home run, David, not a lot of pressure. But we've got David Tucker from Edmentum to talk with us today, and he has some colleagues from Norfolk that are going to be joining him in this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, David.
Wow. Yeah, Amy, thank you. Yeah, no pressure at all. And it is a privilege and an honor. So my plan today is to talk the least amount and hand most of the presentation over to our partners in Norfolk that we've been working with for the past 3 years now for math instruction. So the topic of the webinar today is accelerating math learning. I think the most important words on this slide are collaborative and partnership. It has been a privilege to work with the two folks that are on the meeting today from Norfolk. The big story here is about student outcomes. And I think a lot of the success in Norfolk can be chalked up to just the focus, the passion, the commitment that Dr. Tisha Jones and Rhonda White have to student growth and student success in Norfolk, and the leadership of Dr. Sharon Birdsong there. So today, just want to go through kind of an introduction and context. We talk a little bit about the context in which this math instruction and effort for acceleration is taking place. Look at some of the instructional models and best practices, how the partnership and math instruction and the implementation of some of the platforms that they use has been refined over time, kind of collecting and acting on data. And then the most important part of the story, of course, is focusing on student outcomes, efficacy, and impact. And then we hope to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. If you think of a question while we're presenting, please just type it in the chat or write it down somewhere so that when we get to the end, we can address as many of those as possible. So we will be looking at the chat as we talk. So feel free to put it in there, and we'll try to even address some of those on the fly. I do just want to kind of call out like the bigger picture here. Norfolk has done incredible work, not just in math, but in literacy, in aligning their instruction so that students are college and career ready. And that, of course, has been led by Dr. Sharon Birdsong, Superintendent of Norfolk. They are really focused now 3 years of this drive for equity and excellence in Norfolk Public Schools. And I thought this was the neatest thing that I found. There is a joint project between Harvard, the Center for Education, Policy Research at Harvard, and Stanford's Educational Opportunity Project that goes through multiple states and is assessing the extent to which students have recovered from the pandemic. And this is from the executive summary from Virginia. And I love to see Norfolk City and Henrico County here. Fortunately, Norfolk City and Henrico County schools took huge strides in the right direction, where average math achievement improved by more than half of a grade equivalent in a single year, an impressive achievement. So just a fantastic call out from one of the sort of preeminent projects for measuring how students are recovering from pandemic learning or learning loss or learning gaps, however you want to talk about that. So without further ado, I do want to introduce your presenters for today. Dr. Tisha Jones is the Senior Coordinator of Secondary Mathematics. And we also have Rhonda White, who is the Senior Coordinator of Elementary Mathematics. And I am going to turn things over to them, and we'll sort of go to that, big contextual picture of how they originally partnered with Edmentum and kind of started this this journey of revamping math instruction in Norfolk Public Schools.
Well, good morning. I think you need to mute over there. Thank you so much for joining us. And we would just like to begin by saying we really give all credit, not just to the work that we're doing with our central office, but to our teachers, the hard work that they put in day after day. And we just want to take this time to just begin by thanking our teachers for all that they do, because we know that it's their hard work day after day that really help us to help our students, to get them going. So just to give you a brief overview of who we are as a school system, we wanted to just begin with just sharing some of our demographics. And I know some of you may have school systems that are very similar or very different, but just to give you the context from which we're working. And as you can see, we have a wide variety of students we have the privilege to serve in our district. We have approximately, you can go on, David, 30,000 students, just short of 30,000 students, and very high poverty district. And when you're thinking in terms of staff, we do have the same issues that many districts have, in which we have close to, Tisha, correct me, 200? Almost 200 vacancies. So we're dealing with a lot of vacancies, a lot of long-term substitute teachers. Supporting everyone, though, is our goal. So supporting every teacher, no matter their entrance into the field. We call them our non-traditional teachers, but we love on them just the same. And we want to make sure that they have the same support that they need to help their students.
Okay, so if you are a Virginia educator, you are aware that the overarching goals for all Virginia mathematics are the 5 process goals set out by our VDOE SOLs, our VDOE SOLs. The first one is the mathematical problem solving. This is in here. This is where we want our students to use problem solving by applying concepts and skills to the real world or to real world situations. We have mathematical connections, where we are expected that students are expected to make mathematical connections to some of their prior knowledge or also other content areas. The next one, mathematical communications, where students are using communication to include their specialized mathematics vocabulary and symbolic notation, both written and verbally. Mathematical representations. Students are expected to use representations that include the CRA, concrete, representational, and abstract process of learning, and or different representations, your physical, your visual, symbolic, verbal, and also contextual representations. The last one, mathematical reasoning. This is where students are expected to reason mathematically through critical thinking, through making, testing, evaluating ideas, and using justifications.
So we can't go on without expressing the importance of what we believe is at the center of our really good instruction. And that's beginning with using the most mathematically sound and aligned resources. And so we take to heart having the opportunity to make sure that our teachers have access to the most aligned and actually aligned to our Virginia SOLs, but also that offer opportunities for differentiation, thinking about students who need intervention and thinking about students who need that acceleration. We want to make sure that they have that easy access to those materials. Now, being very transparent, we are fortunate enough to have a math specialist in every elementary building, and we have department chairs in our secondary buildings. And so these people are so talented. They are on our team to help us create these resources, organize these resources, and to coach teachers with using these resources. But this is where we believe those collaborative plannings have to start and center around the most effective resources. This is how we ensure that that tier 1 instruction is aligned to what we think our students need. Now, this is called
go ahead,
our
Rhonda.
math slide. We affectionately call it our math slide, and it's basically a Google Doc. And you can see the little number in the corner, the date in the corner. That's this was an old snippet. Every time we update it, we just kind of make sure we remind ourselves this was the last time it was updated. But this is a living, breathing document, because as the state releases new materials, we'll make sure that we link it here. Or as we have our PLCs developing awesome new resources, we can link it here after we vetted them, of course. So we want it to be this one-stop shop for our curriculum. So that includes our standards, that includes our pacing, that includes our resources, that includes our assessments. You'll even notice that we have included things for some of our groups, such as our students with disabilities. We need everything to be here so that during that collaborative planning, you go here, you're able to have discussions around it, and then we can move forward. But we recognize that just putting it here may not have been enough. So then we, over the years, have really developed not just a pacing guide, but additional resources. And I think Tisha's going to share what those look like.
Yeah, so once you click on a link, the links that are on the math slide that Rhonda just showed you, it's going to take you to the pacing guide. And from the pacing guide, we have what's called unit guides. So our pacing guides ensure that we are covering all of the standards, right? So the curriculum guides, once you get to the curriculum guides, we then take each unit of study, and we complete a curriculum guide for each unit of study, for each course, for each grade level, and so on, that our SOL, can you go back just one, David? That includes several different parts. So the parts that we're about to show you, it is one curriculum guide for one unit, but it's going to show you all the different parts, okay? So this first page that we have up here, it includes things or items just straight from our VDOE standards. That includes, of course, the standards itself, the essential knowledge and skills. We include a vocabulary section, manipulatives, and also some instructional resources that are linked to another page that has some additional resources to be used. The second page that's up there, we've included assessment resources, I can statements if the building decides to use I can statements for the students. We include essential, not essential questions and big ideas. In addition, on the third page, David, we've also include per standard some misconceptions, okay? Teachers need to understand what are the common mistakes that our students make. So if we put that up front for them, they can use that to help them with their instruction, or to be able to address those misconceptions during their instruction. On the next page, the last page that we have up here, we also felt it was important to include, because of we have lots of non-traditional teachers in our system, that we felt like we needed to include what's called learning progressions for the unit. So if we say that a unit is going to take 10 days to complete, we want to give them some samples of what each of those days would look like or could look like. Of course, it's just a snippet, it's not an entire lesson. You do have to add some other things to it to make it a complete lesson, but we felt that providing these things would help in planning and understand truly what should come first, what should come second, and what we should end with, okay? So in each one of these lessons that we include, we make sure that we have the essential knowledge and skills that goes with that lesson. We create a learner objective that encompasses the essential knowledge and skills. We also include a formative assessment that is aligned to the learner objective. And then we end with some suggested instructional resources that can be used to help teach that actual lesson, okay? So we try to give them the tools that they need in order to be successful in actually completing a full lesson, a full unit of study.
So going from that big picture, we have to make sure that we are adhering to the overarching ideas of the 5 process goals, breaking it down to looking at the pacing, breaking it down to looking at the units, breaking it down now to even what does that look like day by day? We're trying to make sure that our teachers have this capacity to think through a lesson, to think about the purpose, to think about how your daily math review is important, your number sense routines in elementary, how much of your time should be spent on explicit instruction, guided practice with that important feedback, even engaging them in that independent practice, because we don't want their first time that they're working alone to be on an assessment, right? We want to have some independent practice time so that we can get a really good all groups. And finally, remembering checking for understanding throughout and ending with some kind of closure with a formative assessment. And we do this first part like in cycles because we want to give acknowledgement to the importance of work such as from people such as Zaretta Hammond, who speaks about using this critically responsive teaching and thinking about cycles and chunking instruction. So with all of this given to our teachers, we still had this question in mind, and that was, how can we equitably provide interventions for all of our students? And that's that next click, David. How can we make sure that with all of the resources we're providing, the coaching, using the resources, we still have students who are ready for more, who are ready to be accelerated, who are ready, who need that intervention? And how can we make sure that there is something in place for them? And that's when we began our search. So what we did is we had a team of a committee rather of math specialists, of teachers. We even had students engaged, and they explored several platforms that we wanted to be our main platform for intervention that would couple and marry well with what we had in place, what we knew we needed to work on, and
Hey,
what
Keisha,
good.
Okay, well, I think she froze on us.
yes.
Yes, she did. Okay, so if you could go to the next slide.
Yep.
Sorry.
I'm back.
That's so convenient.
Oh, it is. So what we found was that the main pillars of Edmentum, they married really well with the 5 process goals and what we held true to be true about real mathematics and what we want our students to do. So just beginning with the first one, the conceptual understanding. Several of us are very aware that CRA, and we spoke about this earlier when we were talking about our representations and being able to connect ideas. The CRA framework is evidence-based, it's research-based, and it's especially good for students who struggle with mathematics. So we wanted to find a program, and Edmentum's pillars included this conceptual understanding throughout the program, throughout the lessons. You will find that CRA embedded into how the lessons are presented. The next one was the reasoning and problem solving, and What Works Clearinghouse suggests the 4 steps of PALIA, and so does Edmentum's format. It actually takes the lessons and it presents problems using the understanding, plan, solve, and check, that whole process. And it has to become more than a graphic organizer on a wall or a worksheet. It has to be the way that students reason through the problems. And this is how Edmentum flows through. And so that was another check in the box for us. The next one, the mathematical models and reasoning. Depending on the different algorithm, this is just an example of one. What it does is it layers the different methods. We want our students to be exposed to alternative ways to work through, to reason, to apply the mathematics. And that's one of the pillars that absolutely, because it's really hard. And if you ever taught mathematics, to teach reasoning, but when they can be presented those problems and break them down, in this example, it's using the place value, and it's showing how you can definitely use place value one way, but you can basically show, especially our students, they come back and they say, well, my mommy did it this way. Well, we can make sense of that, but we can also make sense of it conceptually. The mathematical communications throughout Edmentum's exact path, you will find that appropriate vocabulary being utilized. And that's something that we emphasize with our students. In the VDOE, they have the word wall cards, which they're absolutely awesome, but we have got to make sure that not only our teachers are using those, but our students are using those. And Edmentum's exact path presents the lessons with that appropriate vocabulary. And finally, the key math skills. Several studies have shown that those algebra-ready skills include that students are being exposed to whole numbers and the operations with those, that the students are exposed to fractions very early on in a conceptual way that can build that procedural understanding later, and that geometry is a part of what they're introduced to in a way so that they, again, can layer that understanding. So these 5 pillars, they really married well. And we decided that this was going to be our intervention program.
So Rhonda has outlined several reasons of why we chose Exact Path. Some other reasons that we chose is because of their design or their lesson design principles. So they adapt their lessons are adaptive. They believe in individualized learning. So it tailors the learning to each student by providing some instruction at an appropriate level, a sequence, and pace. So it's also assessment driven mastery learning. So it focuses on efficient learning. Students have to show mastery of key concepts through their assessments. So they are investing time on not yet mastered content. And they proceed through learning new content at their own pace. And it's not teacher driven, it is actually on their own pace. The third one up here, so I think we're, yes, you're right. You're okay. It's okay, David. You can leave it like that. So, because I'm looking at the magnifying glass right this moment. So if you look at the third one, the purple one, you have deliberate practice and immediate feedback. So it offers intentional and aligned practices that supports their increasing level of understanding. You have their explicit instruction and scaffolding. So it delivers the content, delivery of the content begins with your explicit instruction, then it uses a scaffold approach, and then students move towards an independent application. You have your active engaging learning. So it involves learners in responding to and manipulating information while they're actually learning it. And it's ensuring that there's involvement in building the understanding and minimal passive reception of the information. So also, lastly, we have subject area best practices. It engages learners and builds understanding of using some of the research-based practices and also those instructional strategies. So in summary, up here in 3 bullet points, every learner receives lessons that's appropriate to their level of development, okay? That means that where they are, what they understand, it builds on what their understanding is. The second one, every learner receives lessons sequenced in a flexible way to accommodate some of their personal progress. And then every learner receives lessons paced based on their individual needs.
So given this, we had to think, how can we implore our teachers to really buy into this? And we had to be flexible. We have to just be honest with this. So what we're going to share now are just some options that we share with teachers. And then even over time, some of these have even morphed to be responsive to the needs of students and the needs of our teachers, the capacity of our teachers. And with working with the teachers and our math specialists and department chairs, I think this is an evolving process. How can we best make sure that we, again, are having that efficient, effective mathematics instruction that is responsive to our students? So this first option, just to preface this with, in math in our elementary buildings, we have 60 minutes allocated. That's the requirement. Occasionally, schools are able to find another minute or two here or there, but 60 minutes is a requirement. So one way that we found that teachers were finding success with using Edmentum is that they would take their block and they would have a 10-minute warm up, and that might be a daily math review or number sense routine. They might alter it on different days. Then they would have a 20-minute whole group in which they would have some modeling, some guided, those cycles of back and forth with the feedback, using the CRA, the manipulatives, and then they would have a 25-minute independent practice time. And during this time, they would offer choice boards, the I must do, I can do, I may do, those types of boards. Edmentum became a part of what students could choose to do on those choice boards. And then they could also, at this point, pull those data-driven small groups for that teacher-facing opportunity. I will say here is where our teachers began to really dig into Edmentum being this blended program in which it is a platform and students are able to sit and work on the computer. But there are so many resources that the teachers began to pull and even use those small groups, because that's a part of it. They would pull up their dashboard during their plannings, their data meetings, and then they would say, okay, our students need to work on this, or I need to pull a group on this. And this is during this independent time is when they would begin to pull those small groups and use those activity sheets and those plans, which I must say are pretty impressive. The second option is one in which it could capitalize on opportunities for problem solving, such as rich tasks from VDOE. And I've seen this happen in a couple of ways. It could be that they begin the class with the warm up, they set the stage for the math block, and then they have everyone in the class working on either Edmentum or the rich task, or working collaboratively in heterogeneous groups, because there's power in that, not just always homogeneous groups, and working on rich tasks. And then they may pull students to a small group, or everyone is on Edmentum, on exact path, working on whatever lesson it is. The beauty of that is that I could be working on a lesson on division. You could be working on something from problem solving to a first semester. So it's dependent on what we need. And then when my teacher pulls me into this small group, it's very specific to whatever, if I'm needing some acceleration, if I'm ready for acceleration, or if I need some intervention to accompany whatever tier 1 we're doing. So it became very flexible. And finally, this last option, which by all means is not the only way to teach mathematics, but I call this the 3 rings. And I've actually seen 4 rings here lately, but this one requires a lot of classroom management and being very intentional. And so our coaching around how this looks, of course, has to be present before all of this can happen without it being chaotic. Again, during this small group time, it could be addressing needs from tier 1 or extending the learning, the teaching from tier 1 from earlier in the week, or it could be pulling from lessons from Edmentum, looking at the dashboard and figuring out what kind of focus could I have for this particular small group for these 3 students, or even one-on-one. The technology could be that exact path. So they're getting that specific, what do you need? Specifically, what do you need on the exact path? And then we also had some teachers who began to assign lessons. So they would also use that assignment feature. In elementary, they found that if they could assign lessons and they could have students working on the teacher lessons that are aligned with tier 1, and then when students did that, they could also split that time and they would have some time to work on exact path on some prerequisite skills. So they found ways to do both. And finally, again, just having the opportunity to have some choice boards or some choice opportunities for students, which may include some independent small group games, mathematics focused games, and things like that.
Yeah, so now as far as your secondary and your middle school, those practices, so secondary, our middle schools are set up a little differently than your normal middle schools. We have 4 blocks a day and we're on an A/B alternating schedule. So students are going to attend each class every other day, which is called single block classes. So they complete 8 classes in one school year. So they have, like I said, math class every other day for approximately 90 minutes, a class period. Students are required to take a math elective along with their classes. So this year's math electives include math finance, math problem solving, and we also have included what's called a math support classes. Now, in all of these math electives, they are required to complete their Edmentum exact path assignments. For at least, they have to complete at least 60 minutes per week. If they have classes 2 days a week, it would be 30 minutes a day. And if they had classes 3 days a week, it is understood that it should be approximately, or if not more than 20 minutes a day. Okay. But in the support classes is where most of the order to actually implement Edmentum exact path. So they have 3 options in that support class. Option 1, in all of these options, you have to begin, they are required to begin with what's called a daily math review. Most people will call that a warm-up, okay? And at the end of each class period, they are required to do a daily formative assessment, okay? Option 1, students participate in the Edmentum station, and the teacher and the tutor, if there's a tutor available, will pull small groups to provide that intervention. All students should attend the teacher or the tutor small group station weekly, sometime during that week, depending on the actual data that says that they need to be pulled for a small group. Option 2, students participate in an Edmentum station, and then the teacher will, by themselves, will pull small groups to provide intervention. And again, all students should attend the teacher small group station weekly. And sometimes it can be difficult to pull all of your students or these students that need it, maybe a big group. So you want to make sure that you are given time to actually do that. And it doesn't have to be an actual different intervention every single day. Okay. It's just the same intervention with different students. And then option 3 would be the 3 rotations at 20 to 25 minutes each. Instruction and activities should be, all instruction and activities should be done in small groups, and all students should attend each station every class period. So it's not you stay in here all one class period, then the next time I see you, we switch. It is truly, they're going to see every single station, every single, during that class period. Okay.
So early in our implementation, we had we required everyone to be on the program 60 minutes. The majority of our students had so many gaps we needed to fill, and the research showed that they needed at least 45 minutes plus in order to really show gain. So we went with 60 minutes. Now, for certain students, that happened in elementary. For certain students, it didn't. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So as we're showing these other practices, the first one just, the first little box just really talks about how we realized we couldn't necessarily get 60 minutes per week in for every student, because some of those students who needed that 60 minutes, they also needed to have some face-to-face time with their teacher. They needed to be also worked with possibly by the special ed teacher or by the math specialist, because they had those tier 3 struggles with mathematics. So we then began to work with schools. Some schools began to use some before and after school time in order to allow students to get on exact path and really work on those skills. Some teachers decided that they were going to assign a certain number of minutes for homework. For homework, you had to read and you had to be on exact path for 15 minutes. That was fine. For some schools, they decided that they wanted to be creative and have lunch bunches. And some of the time they would allow students to work on exact path, and other times they did other activities that really engaged the students. So as we're moving through this, I'll just say that what really motivated most people to use it were the challenges that the schools developed. They had such as March Madness, in which they actually engaged one of our universities to come over and bring their basketball team and their mascot. So that was really exciting. We had professional learning, that because the buy-in, we wanted to make sure that the teachers really owned the program and understood how to use it. Edmentum's staff was very supportive with being willing to even come, on the weekend, on Saturdays, and we did Saturday sessions. But those sessions, they were able to provide for us were throughout the day. It went from, yes, not the sit and get because you had your laptop in front of you, but it became also embedded within your
Uh-oh. Amy, we'll give it a second. All right. While we are addressing the technical difficulty, I do want to just kind of zoom out for a second and remind folks that when they are talking about Edmentum Exact Path, that is an assessment-driven instructional platform. So Norfolk Public Schools uses Renaissance Star for certain grade levels for literacy and for mathematics. And that STAR assessment is driving the instruction. So when they're talking about assessment-driven, it's driven by STAR assessment. It's also driven by our own diagnostic, which Norfolk is sort of slowly making the transition. I think Tisha is back.
Yes,
and
I'm
looks like we
sorry.
have a working computer. No, that's okay. But
It's the internet. Something's going on
yeah.
with the internet here. So it's sort of like taking us out and then kicking us back in. So I'm back. So we can go on to the next slide.
Perfect. And Rhonda left off on professional learning. And I think one of the shifts in thinking, it was the focus for accountability really was about minutes at first. How many minutes are students spending on the program? And remember, this tacks back to the idea of, hey, we're providing quality tier 1 instruction. Here's how we're ensuring it. How do we equitably and consistently provide opportunities for students to accelerate or to provide intervention in places where it's needed? And while that focus first was on minutes, it later became much more on mastery. And the primary metric that Tisha and Rhonda and their math specialists are tracking now are how many skills are students mastering per semester in the program. And that became a lot of the focus of professional development. So just remember, everything you see here started in year 1 and is being refined in year 2. Now we're in year 3. This is not something that you kind of bite off all at once or tackle all at once. Everything from their math slide to improving the fidelity of implementation of ExactPath has been a work in progress.
So for all these processes that we have put in place, we call monthly data meetings, administration, which sometimes they're leadership team. So these meetings are with every school building in our district, not just those schools that are in need. It build meetings so that we can just ask about come into their buildings that they are to. Now, data meeting, we focus on several OWL, STAR, Edmentum, Lexia, which is our reading district assessment. We give unit assessment for our student district. We talk about discipline data, PBIS data. Discuss it during data meetings. We have it allowed that to determine that we are finding students tier 2 and tier 3 support. We determine the type and frequency. First, we discuss intervention needs. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just breaking up really badly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I'm going to start just a little tad bit over. Use these meetings to allow us to differentiate our support for our schools. We identify students in need of tier 2 and tier 3 supports. We determine type and frequency of project monitoring, discuss intervention needs, make adjustments the data and needed for professional development. ExactPath is the program that provides some of this dashboard for us, our debts, and also that's the link talking about math intervention, those build division year over year.
Yeah, and I think like the important thing here to recognize is very early on in 2020 and 2021, coming out of the pandemic, Norfolk Public Schools as a school system sort of said, as we commit to recovering from this, rather than sort of allow choice or a bit of a buffet of educational technology, we are going to choose one partner for math. We are going to choose one partner for literacy, for intervention. And I think that's what that bold sentence at the bottom of the slide really is all about, that what you get because of that.
I got it.
Is you get common data, common dashboards, common language, reporting that can be rolled up from all buildings to the administrative level, and some real consistency in how you're evaluating implementation and fidelity and impact. So that was a big part, I think, of why both their efforts in mathematics and literacy have been so successful. I want to transition over to impact and efficacy. At the end of the day, what matters are student outcomes. Are students progressing through their education? Are they students that are ready for middle school? When they leave middle school, are they ready for high school? And when they leave high school, are they ready for career or some post-secondary training or college? So in this world of ESSER money going away, folks trying to figure out, what do we put back in local budgets? What do we locally fund? I think it's critical that what is being funded, we know that it works. We know that we have partnerships that yield real student outcomes. So I want to share some research with you that we have just started sharing with Norfolk Public Schools, and it's been validated by a third party. This is a collaborative project between curriculum instruction, so Rhonda and Tisha's team in Norfolk, the accountability and research team in Norfolk Public Schools, and our own Edmentum research team. And again, a third party like Learn platform that's validating the research. The priority is student growth and proficiency. And then being able to empower our partners to communicate to their school boards and external stakeholders that this is a program and a partnership that works. And what that eventually or ultimately creates is sustainable, scalable instruction and intervention, and a partnership that can be sustained, even as the funding landscape changes. So I just want to share with you really quickly one of the correlation studies that we did. We focused on the through-year math computer adaptive assessments. So the correlation that you're going to see today is directly to those Virginia through-year growth assessments that are being administered in our schools in the fall, winter, and spring. So we're looking in grades 3-8. We were able to get a sample size of about 9,300 students across 41 schools, and all of these were using ExactPath in the school year 22-23. If you look at sort of the distribution of skills mastered in ExactPath, on average, a student completed 12 skills in XP, that's ExactPath math, across the year. The recommended dose, notice, isn't a time, right? It's not 45 minutes a week, 60 minutes a week, 8 skills per semester. The average of 12 is obviously like a little bit under the 16 that we'd like to see, but we do have some students who were completing that. Here's the question. Did Norfolk students who completed skills in ExactPath achieve higher fall to spring growth in Virginia state test scores than their peers? And here's what we found. For all grades 3-8, on average, statistically significant differences in SOL growth with steeper growth for the students who use ExactPath. We essentially group students into 4 buckets, and you can see that represented by the 4 lines there. There's a dotted green line. These were students who completed no skills in ExactPath. There is a blue line for students who completed 1-5, a pink line for students who completed 16-23. That's kind of the sweet spot for our research, whether it's with NWEA MAP or Arizona standardized tests, or here in Virginia with the 3-year growth assessment. And then there are students who really kind of overachieve 24 plus skills. And what you'll see with the purple and pink lines, at that recommended dose, is some really great gains in terms of growth, that steeper growth curve. That's kind of the big picture for grades 3-8. So if you look at those students who started with no skills or started, completed no skills during the year, they start at a much higher baseline than those students who were receiving a lot of the intervention. But by spring, that gap that was big in the fall has closed significantly. And that's the work that goes back to the original question that Rhonda was asking, right? How do we equitably scale intervention and acceleration? If you zoom into grades 3-5, we were talking about this data. We've talked about it a little bit about, how come the none group here is starting lower? And there's some sort of, number one, there's a small sample size there. There's 51 students. And Rhonda, the elementary coordinator, was guessing that a lot of those students are in special programs through the elementary schools, programs that are self-contained that serve students who have maybe higher needs. But if you just sort of take the 3 lines, the purple, the pink, the blue, you can see that skill mastery in our program really contributes to a different ending point in the spring. That students who complete that sort of, again, that sweet spot of 16 or more are, they start in a very similar place in the fall. They end up in a little bit more of a divergent place in the spring with more growth. And in middle school, the story is much the same. In middle school, a little different than elementary. Middle school students who really get those none skills, the green line, are often students who are already at or above grade level. They are not scheduled for a math support block. They often are not completing skills in ExactPath. And I think the great story here is that those students who are already at or above grade level start at a higher baseline that dotted green line. They start at a higher score on average. But by spring, the gap between them and those students who are completing skills in exact path has been completely erased. That achievement gap has been closed. So we are finding some really strong correlation between mastering skills in exact path and performance on the state test. I think it put us in a really unique place. There's a lot of correlational studies for NWEA MAP, for Renaissance Star, but again, we are focused on state proficiency, student proficiency on the state test. What all in tutoring is about, getting students back to grade level, making sure they're ready for the next grade. This shows up in school level accountability results, right? There are a number of schools that moved from level 2 to level 1, either for academic achievement or for achievement gap. In English and science and math, there's a lot of math on this side, some really great success stories for mathematics instruction, and some really phenomenal results at a handful of schools that moved from level 3 to level 1 in one academic year. This is in one academic year, 22-23. So, you know, a lot to celebrate here. And again, it goes back to the work that Rhonda and Tisha and her team have done to create consistent tier 1 instruction, and the power of our partnership and collaboration with them to make sure that we're not sitting in there as a program or a supplement, but they've really kind of embedded this approach to intervention and acceleration into their instructional models, into their instructional day, and really using the data to act on it and refine it. Rhonda and Tisha, do you guys have working tech?
Yes.
Little bit. So I want to start off with a question, and then I would love to kind of open it up for other folks here in the last 5 minutes that we have. One of the things that I alluded to just a second ago was all-in tutoring. How has that changed your approach to math instruction during the day? How did that kind of affect the way that exact path kind of fit into that picture?
Yeah, so I want to make sure that y'all can hear me. So all-in tutoring is, or the program, should I say, for all-in tutoring is very different than the program that we're using for our Edmentum exact path. So the ZERN is a program that the state has given us to use. That is what we're using to help support our tier 1 instruction. Okay, those are things that we're teaching right now, teaching on grade level. The exact path is what we are using for our that's filling our gaps, the gaps that our students have. Okay, so that necessarily may not be on grade level. It could be, but it may not be. But they serve two different purposes for us. So we're able to use both programs and use them both efficiently. Rhonda, do you want to add something to that?
No, I would echo that for elementary, and just maybe add on that, again, we're pulling those resources still. So if a teacher can pull those resources from the program to support those students, Edmentum's exact path has a plethora of those additional resources. In addition, they also have little Quizlets, we call them, that the teachers can use to kind of progress monitor where students are with those prerequisite skills.
Any questions from any body in attendance? Feel free to come off mute or type it in the chat. This is called wait time. I was a history teacher before I came to Edmentum. 15 years. Any questions? Well, I do want to end with an invitation. If you're interested in what you heard today, if you want to see what this instruction kind of looks like, if you want to talk to practitioners, math specialists, hear from principals in Norfolk, and kind of see this at the ground level, we would love to invite you to come to Norfolk. Rhonda and Tisha have been gracious and generous enough to host this. There's a QR code on screen. If you scan it, there's a registration form. And we are planning to hold this on March 26th from 9:45 to 1:30. We'll provide a little light breakfast, a little lunch. But most importantly, you can kind of see this, where it's being practiced, that it's not just theoretical, it's not a nice idea. And you can talk to some of those practitioners, ask questions, kind of hear about the daily challenges and refinements that happen that make this sort of growth possible. I just think this is such an incredible success story. Just full credit to the instructional leadership that has come from Rhonda and Tisha and Bruce Brady and Dr. James Pohl, and ultimately, Dr. Birdsong's leadership in trying to bring equity and excellence to every single student and classroom in Norfolk Public Schools. If the focus is on kids, on reading and basic math skills, I think we're doing the right thing. And that work is evident in what folks are doing in NPS. So we would love to have you join us on March 26th. Please scan that QR code. And Rhonda, Tisha, any parting final words?
Well, I mean, just to say thank you for attending. We hope to see you on March 26th.
Thank you for bearing with us through the technology.
Yeah, thank you all. Amy, thank you so much to you and your team at VASS. And I'll let you sign us off here.
I do want to say though that I was really impressed by the webinar, Tisha and Rhonda and David, but I really liked how you all, this wasn't just about the product. You took you took the Virginia standards, you did an overview of how you do curriculum development in your school division, and that's very much appreciated. So people can see, okay, here's the Virginia standards, here is the way we're doing our curriculum, and here's how we use Edmentum, and here are different structures in which you can do that. So very impressed, and I hope you'll have a lot of people come see that in action. I just tweeted it or X'd it or whatever you say these days, tweeted it, and with that QR code, so hopefully you'll get some more people come see you. So y'all have a great day, and y'all did a great job having to be flexible and adaptive to the technology issues.
Yeah.
It happens to everybody, right? It happens to everybody at some point. So I'm really impressed with today's webinar. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much.